Hello, everyone. Today, I want to talk to you about how solar power in China has actually become 35 percentage points cheaper than coal power. In addition, China has already become a superpower in electrification, leading the world in electricity, and solar energy is now like the new oil. China is generating electricity at full speed, building hydropower stations, nuclear power plants, and photovoltaic power stations as fast as it can. For example, the recently announced hydropower station on the Yarlung-Changpo River in Tibet will have an investment of 1.2 trillion yuan. Once completed, its annual power generation will reach 300 billion kilowatt hours, which is 3 times the annual output of the Three Gorges Dam, making it the largest hydropower facility in the world. This is also part of China's powerful top-level planning, aiming to develop China into a major electrified nation. Electricity will be the key to competition between countries in the future. Recently, a report by a mainland news weekly mentioned that China has reached a new height in human electrification. As humanity enters the era of computing power represented by artificial intelligence, electricity has become of great significance to a nation. The recently released data for China's electricity consumption in July this year set a world record. The total electricity consumption across Chinese society reached 1.02 trillion kilowatt hours, an increase of 8.6% compared to last year. This means that in just 1 month, China used as much electricity as Japan did in the entire previous year. This is also the first time in history that a country's monthly electricity consumption has exceeded 1 trillion kilowatt hours, setting a new milestone in human history. 10 years ago, China's electricity generation figures were only half of what they are now. In a decade, they have doubled. Looking back at the history of human electricity generation, ever since British physicist Faraday invented the electric motor in 1831, the level of electrification has represented the degree of modernization of a country and society. In 1902, Lenin proposed that communism was the Soviet regime plus nationwide electrification, making electrification the goal of industrialization and modernization for the emerging socialist state. Throughout the development of various countries, having upstairs and downstairs, electric lights and telephones has long been a beautiful vision of modernization. At the beginning of China's reform and opening up in 1978, the country's power generation was only 256.6 billion kilowatt hours, which was already 60 times higher than in 1949, ranking 7th in the world at that time. As reform and opening up continued to deepen, by 2011, China's power generation surpassed that of the United States for the first time, rising to first place in the world. Since then, China has maintained its position as the world champion, widening the gap with the second-place United States year by year. Last year, China's power generation reached 10.1 trillion kilowatt hours, accounting for 32.3% of the world's total electricity generation. It became the first country in human history to surpass 10 trillion kilowatt hours in annual power generation, while the second-ranked United States generated only 4.6 trillion kilowatt hours, less than half of China's output. China's powerful electricity supply brings enormous development potential. Last year, out of China's 10.1 trillion kilowatt hours of electricity generated, 6.1 trillion kilowatt hours were used for industry, proving that China is a major manufacturing powerhouse. China's industrial electricity consumption is also 6 times that of the United States. As a result, China's steel output is 13 times that of the United States, its automobile production is 3 times higher, and its industrial robot output is 10 times greater than that of the US. Although the United States now talks about wanting to bring manufacturing back, just looking at its electricity supply shows that these claims are nothing but empty talk. Of the 4.6 trillion kilowatt hours of electricity consumed in the US, only 26% is used for industry, proving that the US is merely a consumer nation. Even though the US only uses 1.2 trillion kilowatt hours of electricity for industry, its industrial electricity consumption is just 1/5 of China's. With such a small amount of industrial electricity, the US simply cannot support a manufacturing resurgence, and it's not that easy for it to increase its power generation. In contrast, China's abundant electricity supply allows its 1.4 billion people and 9.6 million square kilometers of land to enjoy the benefits of modern life brought by electricity almost everywhere, while also maintaining reasonable electricity prices. China's electricity price has remained stable for a long time at an average of 0.6 yuan per kilowatt hour, ranking 101st among 147 countries worldwide, placing it in the low electricity price category. By comparison, the average electricity price per kilowatt hour in the United States has risen from 19.95 cents at the beginning of the year to 17.47 cents now, which is about 1.25 yuan per kilowatt hour, an increase of 9.5% in electricity costs. Although the United States is a major energy producer, its electricity price is still 2.1 times that of China. China's stable and abundant electricity supply comes not only from its powerful and diverse power generation capacity, but also from its stable and efficient modern power grid. In 2024, China's installed power generation capacity has reached 3.35 billion kilowatts, a year-on-year increase of 14.6%. Nearly 80% of the newly added power generation comes from renewable energy, and the utilization rate of wind and solar power has reached 95%, with very little waste. China's world-leading power generation, combined with the world's largest ultra-high voltage transmission network, has greatly reduced waste. The ultra-high voltage transmission network consumes very little energy during transmission, ensuring that electricity can safely and reliably cross vast distances to reach users. In the remote northwest regions, electricity generated from wind and solar power can be transmitted to the major power-consuming provinces along the coast, reducing waste. For a vast country, the transmission capacity of the power grid may be even more important than the generators themselves. The vast majority of electricity is generated and consumed in real time, but often the places where electricity is produced and where it is used are separated by thousands of miles. For example, most of China's hydropower, coal power, and wind and solar power are generated in the western regions, while the areas that consume electricity are mostly concentrated in the east, especially along the coast. In addition, different power sources have varying levels of stability and response speeds, so an extremely large and highly capable power grid is needed to transmit electricity where it is needed and to regulate the supply as required. To transmit electricity over long distances in large volumes and with low losses, ultra-high voltage technology is required, specifically alternating current at 1000 kilovolts and direct current at plus 800 kilovolts or higher to build an advanced modern power grid. To make a comparison, a single circuit of an ultra-high voltage direct current power grid can transmit 6 million kilowatts of electricity, which is 5 to 6 times more than a conventional 500 kilovolt direct current grid. The transmission distance can also be 2 to 3 times farther, greatly improving efficiency. At present, China has already built more than 40 ultra-high voltage transmission lines. For long-distance transmission over 4,000 kilometers, the power loss is only 1.5%, whereas traditional power grids can lose as much as 15% to 20% over the same distance. From multiple perspectives such as technological maturity, project scale, standard setting authority, and the completeness of the industrial chain, China's ultra-high voltage transmission technology has already fully surpassed that of the United States, and this advantage is expected to continue into the future. As of this year, China has completed a total of 35 ultra-high voltage transmission projects, including 18 alternating current and 16 direct current lines, with a total length exceeding 46,000 kilometers, accounting for more than 90% of the world's total ultra-high voltage transmission line length. The United States simply cannot compare. As humanity enters the era of computing power represented by artificial intelligence, electricity becomes even more crucial to a nation. Some have predicted that by 2025, the electricity demand from various AI centers in the United States will reach 230 to 260 billion kilowatt hours, and by 2035, this figure will more than triple, reaching about 600 billion to 1 trillion kilowatt hours, which would only account for 1/10 of the total electricity consumption in the US at that time. Let me first give a brief summary. First, by 2035, the decisive factor in competition may be how much power generation capacity a country has rather than its chips. This also highlights the significance of China striving to reach new heights in human electrification. Second, traditionally, the United States' power generation capacity has been stronger than China's. For example, in nuclear power, the US started developing it much earlier than China. However, China has overtaken on the curve, and its current level of electrification is far higher than that of the United States. Not only does China have many more newly built power plants, but the proportion of new energy is also higher. Fourth-generation nuclear power has already entered commercial trial operation, and China has also surpassed the US in energy storage and ultra-high voltage power transmission. In this electrification competition, which has largely gone unnoticed by the outside world, just like with high-speed rail, China's overall foundation has already far surpassed that of the United States. Additionally, when we often say that China is the world's factory, many people may not realize that the real lifeblood of the world's factory is not labor, but energy. Southeast Asia has lower wages than China, so why hasn't China's entire industrial chain relocated there? It all comes down to 3 things: electricity, the power grid, and electricity costs. In the industrial age, oil was key. In the digital age, it's all about electricity. Without stable, affordable, and abundant electricity, concepts like Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence, and high-end manufacturing are nothing but castles in the air. Gigietti's new article, New Wind Cannon, presents an interesting observation. China has already become an energy exporter. Some people ask, when China's industry was underdeveloped in the past, it exported oil. Wasn't it already an energy exporter back then? But by 1993, China's net oil imports had already reached 9.81 million tons, so it had once again become a net oil importer. So how could China possibly be an energy exporter? The key is that China has transformed into a new type of energy exporter, one focused on new energy. Take solar photovoltaics as an example. In 2024, China produced 588 gigawatts of solar panels, of which 40%, that is 235.9 gigawatts, were exported. If we consider exported solar panels as a special form of oil and refer to blogger Deep Sky's calculations, the average value added per barrel of oil is about 6.19 gigajoules. The electricity generated by the solar panels China exported in 2024 is equivalent to the electricity generated by 736 million barrels of oil. This figure is close to the annual oil exports of the major oil-producing country, the United Arab Emirates. And that's not even counting one thing. Oil can only be used once for power generation, while solar panels can continue generating electricity for 20 to 25 years. Each solar panel is equivalent to a miniature oil field that can continuously supply oil for 20 to 25 years. Calculated this way, China's annual solar PV exports are equivalent to a staggering 18.4 billion barrels of oil, which is more than twice the annual exports of the entire organization of the petroleum exporting countries plus Russia. You wouldn't know if you didn't do the math. It's truly astonishing. Over the past decade or so, China has driven down the cost of solar cells by more than 90%, making a tremendous contribution to providing humanity with cheap and environmentally friendly energy. Let's compare the costs of the most popular coal-fired power generation and solar power generation. According to the 2025 Renewable Energy Cost Report from the International Renewable Energy Agency and data from China's National Energy Administration, in 2025, the levelized cost of energy for large-scale solar power in China dropped to about 0.2 to 0.25 yuan per kilowatt hour. In contrast, the levelized cost of energy for coal power, due to fluctuations in coal prices and rising environmental protection costs, is generally between 0.3 and 0.45 yuan per kilowatt hour. The cost of solar power generation is 28.6% to 44.4% lower than that of coal power. If we factor in the external environmental costs of coal power, such as carbon emissions and pollution control, the difference between the two types of power generation can widen to 35% to 50%. It can be said that China has created a new type of affordable energy that is completely different from fossil fuels. Traditional energy exporting countries, such as Saudi Arabia and Russia, follow a model of consuming their own energy resources to obtain energy commodities. But if we regard solar panels as a special kind of energy commodity, then China's model is to consume domestic electricity to produce solar panels for export. In other words, exporting photovoltaic panels is essentially exporting a form of virtual electricity. Another approach is to generate electricity from solar energy in China and then directly export the electricity. This is precisely why China has been vigorously developing power transmission technology in recent years. As mentioned above, China has already built the world's most extensive ultra-high voltage power grid. Photovoltaic power from Xinjiang, hydropower from Sichuan, and nuclear power from the coastal regions are all integrated into a single grid. Green electricity can be transmitted from the deserts of Gansu to chip factories in Jiangsu in just 0.01 seconds. The power grid has become an energy superhighway, making it possible to directly export electricity. In the future, electricity from the Yalong Tsangpo hydropower station in Tibet can be transmitted to South Asia, and the vast photovoltaic power from Xinjiang can reach Central Asia. The electric power Silk Road is already beginning to take shape. In conclusion, why is China going all out to vigorously develop its electric power sector? It's not just for direct economic benefits, but also to launch a 21st century energy revolution that will completely reshape the global industrial landscape. Because when the cost of electricity drops significantly once again, the cost structure of all industries will be rewritten. Not long ago, the Financial Times of the UK marveled, almost trembling, that China is about to become the first major electricity exporting nation in human history, and that electricity will become the key factor in future global competition.